What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of C2C, CFB, UD, SHOW, where Ethan Sauers and myself, Chris K, talk Underdog pick'ems. And we have a great slate of action for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. There's so much action on Thursday and Friday that I think we probably won't even get to Saturday stuff. So a lot of really good games. And Ethan and I were just laughing about how a lot of good games that we won't be able to see because we go to bed we go to bed before midnight. Some really good late night action on Friday night. I think the Rutgers USC game is fun. And then obviously the Boise UNLV game is fun as well. As our listeners and viewers roll in, let's take a quick second, Ethan. What do you think? What's your vibe on the Boise UNLV game just in general?
I think UNLV has a shot. Like I don't think it's completely gone to Boise, but we'll get into the specifics of it. But I think GNT's number is a little high on Sleeper here, or on Underdog rather. I think that UNLV has shown that they can put up points, so they'll be able to kind of keep pace with them. But I also think that their defense is good enough to kind of force them into a little bit of make them at least feel a little uncomfortable about running the ball as much as they usually do.
Yeah, there's a line I really like in that one for GT. Actually, there's two lines, but they're both in the passing game. The run number is, I think, like technically I like the under, but it's like, do you really like an under on Ashton GT? Like, is that something you really want to do? But let's talk Thursday. We're going to skip the Old Dominion Georgia Southern game because Justice is not here. And if we talk about this game incorrectly, which is very likely, he's going to scream at us. And I prefer not to get screamed at on this beautiful day. Let's look at Syracuse and Pitt. These are two top third ACC teams. I don't think Pitt's lost in the ACC yet.
I'm not sure.
So anyways,
right to me, though.
Yeah, ACC is not your conference. I don't blame you. Yeah. What's your take on the game? It sounds like Trevor Pena is probably not going to play.
Okay.
So I think there's some interesting lines for the receivers, but it's like which one takes advantage of it. So I guess I'm curious, what are you drawn to in this game, just generally speaking, for props, not necessarily Syracuse receivers?
Yeah, I mean, off the rip, I think LaQuint Allen 66.5 higher is a decent play. He's gotten really good volume. I don't see why. Like, I know Pitt typically has a pretty solid defense, but it's definitely not what it's been in the past. I need to tread lightly. I know Austin has gotten on me about ripping Pitt too hard here, but I think LaQuint Allen very much in play there. I wish we had maybe a reception number on him to be able to play that, because I know his utilization there is pretty great. But that one jumps out at me as well, or off just right away. Desmond Reed also is one. I think it's a pretty good number, the 80.5 yards. I probably am going to stay away from that. And then just one more before I let you jump in here. I think Jackson Meeks is probably the guy who benefits the most from Pena being out. That said, his number is already 81.5. He's shown that he can consistently beat that, but it is I think it's high enough to make me just a little bit uneasy. I'd still probably play the over, but just enough to make me, like I said, just a little bit on edge.
Yeah, I do think Meeks is probably like the starter that benefits the most. Obviously, Gadsden, I think, as well. Yeah. I think actually, let me rephrase it. Gadsden, I think, is the starter that benefits the most. Meeks is up there too, though. I mean, Meeks is already getting 10 plus targets in each of his last 3 games.
Yeah.
Pena has 20% of target share for them. 12, 6, 12, 11 targets in the last 4 games. So like it's a heavy amount. They pass a ton, run a ton of plays, which makes it very scary to go under.
Yeah.
Because you just have so many more opportunities for the 40-yard catch or the 60-yard catch, right? Like Hatcher weeks and weeks ago like beat it on one play, and that's what you get with some of these receivers. I think I would avoid unders for the receivers, and I'd probably just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to target like an over on Gadsden. That number I want to say started around like 63, so it's already moved up some. But he's going to get volume, and this is a really good matchup. I could see it if we were talking about this on like a Saturday main slate. I would see this as like this could be the shootout. This could be a huge shootout here. So I do like the overs in the receiving game. I will say that 325 or whatever, 334, whatever that number is from McCord passing yards is pretty high.
324.
Yeah, I would hate to do it. It's kind of like almost kind of like JT, where it's like, do I go under on it? But like that's just a lot of yards, man.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like an under there is kind of appropriate. I don't know. I'm kind of speaking both ways, but I think you probably target one way or the other, right? You say, okay, well, you know what, Pena's out. This passing game a little bit less effective. Let's go under on McCord. Or you say, I'm going to avoid McCord's number and just target a receiver like Gadsden and go over.
Yeah, I think that's probably the play rather than trying to thread the needle on an under with McCord and an over.
You know, I'm a thread the needle guy.
Yeah, like that boosted payout too with trying to thread that needle.
Yeah, you got to thread the needle. All right. Pitt doesn't really screen to me as anything that really jumps out as like great options. Is there one for you that you think is a great option?
Gavin Bartholomew's 23.5 is interesting to me. Again, it's a situation where I really wish that there was like an actual reception number, as opposed to just the yardage. But I do think Pitt's going to have to throw to keep up. And he has been a guy who's, been a little bit underutilized, but Syracuse's defense, while they're not like world beaters by any means, like I do think that they'll be competent enough to kind of force some underneath stuff to Bartholomew and avoid the big play. Munfield's number at 66.5. Interesting with the way that he blew up against North Carolina, but again, that was North Carolina, and he did it on 3 catches. So it's nothing seems like a slam dunk here. But what about you? Are you interested in maybe this Kenny Johnson number or anything like that?
No, I think it's the Bartholomew if I had to choose one on the over. He just runs a ton of routes. Like he's always out there.
Yeah.
You wonder if some of these receivers get more attention and, like you said, they kind of dump it off to Bartholomew. If I had to pick one from Pitt, I would go, I think, over there, or I would go over on Eli Holstein. He's been shockingly impressive. I mean, could you have ever thought that Eli Holstein would have been like this type of player?
Future tight end Eli Holstein?
Him and Caden Veldkamp.
I know, right?
Just continuing to press as tight ends. So I like both of those. I mean, not one that I would play a ton of, but I would definitely throw a little bit out there, right? Like I do a little bit of spray and pray, right? Like I maybe grab 30 or 40 picks and kind of just spread them around. And some of them I use more than once, like a Dylan Raiola under 7.5 rush yards. I'll do that a bunch. Whereas Eli Holstein, I might do once or twice on the over. So, but I do like it, relatively speaking.
Yeah. What's their team total? Am I seeing around like 28, 30? Is that?
Let's see. Pitt is 34, while Syracuse is, I want to say 28. Yeah, 28. Okay. So it's game script is helpful for the pass game for Syracuse.
Okay. And I thought it was going to be in the Orange Dome, but it looks like it is going to be in Pitt. So.
Alrighty, let's look at Friday. I think Friday's games are awesome. Like
you don't want to talk any Louisville, BC? Oh, that is Friday. Okay.
Okay, I was going to say, wait a second. How many games are on Thursday?
Yeah.
These are all awesome, I think.
Yeah.
We have the Colin Lacey news, and I was just talking to Ethan about it. I don't think I don't know if they realize it, because these Chris Bell numbers are low, right?
Yeah.
43.5 yards, 3 receptions. I was looking at it in the games that Lacey didn't play at the beginning. Bell basically was the number 1 route runner or number 2 route runner at the very worst, those 2 first weeks. And then last week against Miami, he ran more routes than Lacey. So I feel pretty good about projecting him as the receiver 2, like pretty far and away from like Huggins Bruce or like Jadon Thompson if he comes back type of thing. So I mean, 3 receptions, he's going to get like 6, 7, 8 targets, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's definitely a weak number. I would assume at least 3.5 would be where they put it to cover the push. But I definitely like the over there on 3.
I almost wonder if we should target the receiving yards instead. He's a little bit more of a bigger play guy than,
That's fair.
it almost
43 and
feels,
a half is super doable. Like
he did. I think he had like a 30. If you want to take a look, he had like a 30-yard catch, I want to say, early on, and I had bet his under of like 39 and a half, and I was like, well, shit, there it goes. Like,
yeah, right.
early in the game, you get a 30-yard catch on a 39 and a half yard under is never a great feeling. But
Yeah, for real.
this receiver group, with Ja'Cory Brooks, I wondered, what are your thoughts on, with Lacy out, do we just see a guy replace Lacy like Chris Bell and everybody kind of moves up the pecking order? Or do you think Brooks gets more usage with Lacy?
I think Brooks probably does get an extra, 2 targets, 3 targets than he may have elsewise. But I mean, I do think that it's going to mean that they're going to have to spread the ball out a little bit more. There is the thought that, maybe they run the ball a little bit more with Isaac Brown, with the way that he's been able to, bust out big plays. He got benched at the end of Miami, didn't he?
Kind of like the middle. We talked about it in Slack. He basically fumbled maybe early third-ish, something like that. And he just disappeared. And then they rotated in some other guys. And then he came back in.
Yeah.
Because I remember thinking wow, what a great start for him in DFS. Right. And then he did nothing for the longest time. So yeah, there was a little bit of bench, but he did come back, which is helpful. It wasn't like he fumbled in the 4th and was benched. He came back from it, which is positive to see if you're trying to bet an over there.
Yeah, for sure.
That number is that 70, what is it, 77 and a half?
Yeah.
I mean, I would never bet an under on Isaac Brown, I don't think, just because the number would have to be pretty crazy, I think. But he's just such a big play threat that I would be worried about it. I actually kind of like the over there, but only slightly. Kind of like Holstein, like it a little bit. I wouldn't hammer it, but I think if you want some juice on the game, you could go a lot worse than.
Yeah. How do you feel about this Lewis Bond number? 56.5 seems low for a guy who's getting double-digit targets.
Yeah, this is the conundrum here, right? I went into last week saying in my head, Boston College loves to run the football when they need to, in these blowouts and stuff like that. But when they play in competitive games, it's 50-50. And then last week they're getting their ass kicked the entire game and they run it 65% of the time.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of if you think they're going to be closer to 50-50, this over is great on the yardage.
Yeah.
If you think they're going to try to run the football a bunch, I would probably avoid it.
Yeah. I mean, we see the 10 targets there, and I mentioned it in Slack watching the game last week. Castellanos is just so close to being a good quarterback. But the accuracy just isn't there, He had 10 targets last week, but only caught four passes. So
a lot of short route stuff too. 4 catches, obviously over 18 yards, but it was a lot of screens and 3-yard hitches and stuff like that.
Exactly, and that's because he was missing the deep ball. So there's definitely that to bake into it, but I'd still probably feel okay going with the higher on 56.5. It's not one that makes me feel cozy, but I'm okay with it. I've been trending towards playing a lot more, stacking a lot more on one night in one game, just because, you want to see that pay out quickly and you want to know what you're doing with your bankroll. So on these midweek games, I try and find some that I don't feel the most cozy with that I'm still probably going to play. And so even though we have 3 games on Friday, I'm probably going to be playing a decent amount of the over there for Bond. Do you like any of the quarterback numbers? It's 270.5 for Shuck, and we've got 199.5 for Castellanos.
Not for Shuck. I actually think the over on Castellanos is 199.5. I mean, he got it last week. He got the week before.
Yeah.
I don't love it. He's not a great passer, but he's good enough. So I
think they're going to have to throw. So
yeah, this definitely. Let's look real quick. This is definitely one of those game scripts going to help push towards the pass. You would think. Touchdown Underdog. Yeah. Their total is 23. So yeah, I think I would avoid Shuck, but especially with like him missing a guy and maybe, like you said, maybe do they trend to more run? I think I would rather just avoid that situation and that question mark and go like Castellanos and Bond and Bell are all the interesting ones for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The game of the week, the game of the Friday. Is it Boise UNLV or is it Rutgers USC?
I mean, it depends on who you ask. I'm partial to the Big Ten.
If you're a drooler like Katz would say, you'd probably say Boise UNLV, right? If you're a drooler like Katz. I think this is a fun game. Like I said, my bedtime is 10:30 and the game is 10:30. So I will probably watch a very limited amount of it.
Why that Central Time Zone is the best time zone, man.
Dude, I wish I was Central Time Zone, but every time I go visit Auburn, it's great because I can watch these late games and I don't feel like death the next day. Question of the night, question of the morning. Ashton GT over or under? Lower or higher?
Under, lower. We're taking the sketchy route here. I know what he's done. It seems dumb, but like 193.5, even I don't know. I'm looking at his game log and like the only games he hasn't reached it were Oregon, where he missed it by 4 yards.
Yeah.
And then Utah State, where he missed it by 7 yards. So like
it's insane. I did Boise State this morning and I tried so hard to get this to be an over. I have him at 76% of carries, which is 28.9 attempts. That's insane. Okay.
Yeah.
I have him at 8 yards per carry. I've never once put anybody over 6.5 yards per carry.
Yeah.
He's still only at 181 based on like the scaling towards Vegas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's insane. I would, if gun to my head, I would do lower, but there's no way I would ever actually hit submit on it. Instead,
I know what you like.
The Ashton GT receptions over and the receiving yards, I keep saying over, higher are like no doubters to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the reception. You know, I mean, we've mentioned it earlier, but like you'd think that they would try and cover the push and bump it or drop it, but I would obviously bump it because I feel pretty confident that 3 is a nice number there.
Yeah, I specifically like the reception, but I mean, the guy had 5 targets against Oregon, had 4 targets last week against Hawaii. He's gotten 0 in some of these 2 blowouts, but when it's not a blowout, I mean, he is certainly getting some action. So I think either one of those is good. Either one of those hires are good.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would ever touch the rushing number when I have a receiving option like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's little reason to.
Jaden Thomas, I was surprised at how much I like the rushing hire.
Yeah. I can get on that.
They kind of rotated in a bunch of guys, and Slook is gone, and they've kind of more focused recently on him. He's like 35 to 40% of usage on the ground with Haj Malik around 35%, and then they kind of divvy up the rest to random guys. But like, I don't know, I'm not that threatened by the Boise defense, and he'll get 12, 13 carries, 14 carries at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pretty cozy one. Like I feel comfortable with that. We always seem to talk about Ricky White on this show. So 100.5. You think he's triple digits this week?
That I have him over, but or I have him higher, but I would. It's not touch. It's like 106. It's like I'm not touching this.
Yeah,
it's crazy. The amount of usage he's getting is insane.
Yeah.
And
he's got 47.5% of the team targets.
And that's if you include like the Sluka stuff. If you took away the Sluka stuff, he'd probably be closer to like 55%.
Yeah. Like as of week 5.
Yeah, it's stupid, but not touching that one. One that's if you wanted to do a Boise State receiver, I think Camper lower is the move, but receiving
yardage or
yards, yeah.
4.5
receptions though feels like not a bad under or lower as well though.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of all across the board with target numbers. So
yeah, he's at 21% for the season. Last week he had 11 of maybe 27, so he's getting like closer to that. But before that, the targets number were 6, 7, 4, 3, and 6. So it's not like he's getting heavy volume. Boise State, against Oregon, he had 7 targets, but they threw it a bunch. So it wasn't even like a heavy amount there. So I don't know. I think that one makes sense if you wanted to go under, find a lower, then that would make some decent sense.
Do we want to touch on Mox here? He's saying in the chat 211.5, which actually that number's changed for Malik Williams. But the passing yardage over, how do you feel about 215.5? Touching it?
I don't. I had a bunch on him to hit 200 last week, and he missed it by like 4 yards. So I'd prefer not to do that again.
It does seem like they're going to have to throw the ball more, though.
It does, but he's not a volume passer. He's just really
big plays. He just chucks it up to Ricky White. So.
Yeah. So I think I would just avoid. If I had to, I would bet lower, but I would just avoid.
Yeah, that kind of tracks.
What about Maddox Madsen? When they played Oregon, he was like 3.7 yards per attempt. Is there any consideration to lower there?
Yeah, I think lower is a very feasible option for Madsen. Is it my imagination, or does they kind of start slow, right?
I have not watched a ton because they're West Coast and my bedtime.
I remember them talking about it a little bit during the Syracuse game. I'm pretty sure. And they've kind of had a little bit of a slow start. If they get out to a slow start against Boise, like Boise's not going to throw. Like if Gene T's having success and UNLV doesn't, come out and match them and really play the way that I think they can play, there's no incentive for Boise to really throw the ball a ton.
Yeah, Boise's slight favorites, field goal favorites, team total of 34. You're right. If they do get ahead, I do think they could sit on it. I wonder. I mean, I don't think the backups would ever impact GT but if Gaines and Dubar were healthy, which I don't think we would have any idea about.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if they could run it 45, 50 times and and still GT get his 30, 35 carries, but then have some other guys in there.
Yeah, I don't hate the 17.5 completion higher for Madsen. Like, I feel like that one is kind of decent. I don't know. I'm looking at his attempts, and
he just hasn't had to throw, right? Exactly. So it's so hard to gauge. I think he's going to be obviously much closer to Oregon, which I want to say he threw it 40 or 42 times, something like that. So I think it's an avoid, but I can see where your head's at. I mean, if he completed 18 out of 40 passes, that's a bad day, and he still hits it. And
he completed 17 out of 40 against Oregon. So
maybe that's where they're getting the number.
Yeah, right.
So let's talk Rutgers USC and then wrap it up with our picks.
Yeah, cool.
Fun game. I talked about burning the red shirt. Fun game. I hate these receivers for USC. They give me trouble, but I continue to go back for them.
Yeah. Well, the numbers are usually just so juicy for them because you don't know who's going to get them all. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two of them that I think jump out at me, and there's one that technically is an edge, and I may just avoid it. I think Jacoby Lane higher. I keep saying over. Higher is solid there. He's getting good volume. I think Zachariah Branch over 3 receptions makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And I don't
they're just laying the even numbers, aren't they?
They are leaning into the even numbers right now. So I don't know. Do you like one receiver specifically, or do you have thoughts on Branch and Lane?
I really think Jacoby Lane is their best receiver. Like, I know that I think last week he kind of disappointed in the second half, but to me, he's the guy who has the ability to really like funnel targets to himself. Like, I think that Miller Moss and him have a pretty good rapport down the stretch here. I really like the 35.5 higher. Like, I think that's the best number, perhaps, of all of the ones that we're talking about today. Like, I really like that number. Zachariah Branch, if it was 3.5, I'd feel uneasy about it, but I'm A-okay with 3. Like, I think that's a solid play.
Yeah. These receivers randomly will pop off for like 8 or 10 targets. And I think the 3 number is competitive, but still fine. And maybe he's the guy that gets like 7 or 8 targets that game. Mekhi Lemon, it's hard to like the higher, but I don't know. He's gotten a ton of usage the last couple of weeks. Does that continue? Does it not? I'm avoiding and just watching for the time being. Instead,
Yeah.
I'm going to lean into my Monungai-ness
Oh, hell yeah.
and go higher on Monungai. I
Yeah,
think the rushing
really
volume
like
is
that
just
number
so
too.
high.
Yeah. I think that's a great play. I mean, if we're talking receivers for USC, do we like over on or higher than the 296.5?
We like the higher. Yeah, the
Yeah.
volume is insane. They just throw it so much. They'll throw it 40 times. And Miller Moss, it's funny. He's really not that great in terms of yards per attempt by any means.
Yeah.
But the volume is just so high.
Attempts against Maryland. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would definitely lean into the higher on Moss.
Yeah. The 24.5 on completions is kind of interesting too. I mean, I know a lot. They do push the ball pretty well. So, I mean, that's possible, to hit that over without completing 25 passes. But I also think.
You think there's any East Coast, West Coast issues here?
With Rutgers going to USC, when are they traveling? Do we know?
I don't know.
I mean, if they traveled yesterday, or even I can't imagine they traveled today. Then yeah, I think that's definitely in play. I'm really curious. That's something that I'm want to go back and take a little bit more of a look at. Is when are these teams traveling? Usually on social media, they'll post on Twitter the team leaving or the team getting on the plane travel day or whatever. So I'm going to see if there's any insight into those games. I feel like when Penn State went out to LA, they traveled, I believe, on Tuesday
for a Saturday game.
And so I think that all comes into play. Mox is on this Woody Marks number. It looks like with the
higher.
Yeah, he's saying awful Rutgers front.
Yeah, we like the higher as well. I mean, Rutgers is just reeling. They started off so strong, and then they just had a bunch of injuries, and
it does look Moxley saying Rutgers left yesterday, so last night. So I think that is there's definitely a chance for some lag there, some jet lag, and some issues. But
yeah, the Marks number is solid. I like the higher there. They're 2 touchdown favorites. I didn't realize they were that big a favorite, but makes sense. I mean, they struggled against UCLA at home, right? The reverse, and they struggled. So yeah, I like USC hires pretty much across the board. If I had to blanket a statement there,
that Woody Marks reception number is kind of interesting too. 3.5. I know he has kind of had up and down usage, but last week 7 targets. If we think that this game is going to be competitive, I wish it was half a mark down. But
now you want the even number.
Exactly. Oh, I always want the even numbers. I'm just surprised that we're seeing so many of them.
I don't think I would touch it. He kind of goes from I want to say, if I remember his game log correctly, it's 3, 4, 10, 4, 4, 3, 7. It's in terms of targets. It's a little sporadic. I haven't necessarily pegged why, and so for that reason, I'll just avoid. I think there's other ones in here that are more intriguing. But all right, let's take a look. We got a couple minutes here. I'll let you pick first, unless you pick mine, and then I'm taking it.
You're taking Gianti. I'm going to take the Jacoby Lane higher than 35.5.
Okay. I am going to go Gianti, but I'm going to go yards to avoid the push.
Okay. So we're going lower on, or no, you're going receiving yards higher.
Receiving yards higher. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. I am going to go higher on LaQuint Allen tonight with 66.5.
You're going to try to get the early lead on me.
I am going to try and put the.
You're up, by the way. You got the Restrepo over.
Yeah, I did.
Jordan James. There are no rescues. Underdog might do it, but there's no rescues on this show.
No, we don't.
So Jordan James did not hit. Isaiah Horton for me did not hit, and Kyron Jones did not hit. But I like pain and losing Kyron Jones over. So this is what it is. I'll go Chris Bell. I'll do the over 43, higher 43.5 yards. I think both of them are fine. They're both the same to me, and for sake of not getting a push in our little mini competition, I'm not going to do that.
That tracks.
So,
Cool, man.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the show. What a great slate of weekday stuff. You got some degenerate stuff on Tuesday, Wednesday. You got ACC matchup tonight with a degenerate game, ODU, Georgia Southern.
I mean, Kennesaw State beating Liberty, like
didn't
touch on that. But
that was their first win. Insane. I think I saw the field goal post like down my street earlier. Yeah. But hope you guys enjoy it. It's a great slate of games, Friday, Saturday, etc. So enjoy it, and we'll catch you guys next week.